Do you find that a colour wheel isn't much practical help when it comes to mixing your paints? Today I'm going to show you a much easier way to understand colour mixing. Now, there's a difference between understanding scientific colour theory and mixing paint, and that is that we're working with something that's actually physical. It has much more limitations than the pure scientific method of looking at and mixing light together. So today I'm going to show you the way that I've been teaching students in real life classes for over 20 years to understand colour mixing. We're going to think of colour more like a family tree. I'll explain as we go along, so let's get started. So in this video, I'm going to demonstrate using watercolor pencils. Now, I could be using any paint medium. It's just that these will make a little bit less mess and be quicker for me to swatch. So let's start by thinking about our colors as almost a family tree. So we're going to start with our primary colors. Where they mix together, they're going to have offspring. So let's think about primary colors. Let's start here with blue. So let's swatch this one. Now, the thing to know about primary colours is that there's more than one set of primaries. We're very familiar with artist primaries because we have the limitations of working with physical pigments. Therefore, our primaries are going to be blue and yellow and red. Now, I've chosen quite a pinkish red here. For the purposes of colour mixing, you can just think of pink as a type of red. So let's activate these colours. Now, I mentioned artist primaries. If these were scientific primaries, so if you were a scientist working in perhaps light technology where you needed to make a television screen, you wouldn't be working with these primaries. This yellow would be replaced with green. Now, people get very angry with me sometimes in the comments. A quick Google search will explain what I am talking about. It's not something we need to worry about too much in this video. And if you are about to type an angry comment, do understand that you're typing it on a device that uses RGB technology, and have a think about what those letters might stand for. So there's only really 6 main colours you need to think about when you're learning to mix colours. So this is quite a modern family because there are 3 people in this family, but they're going to create offspring. And there are only 3 possible offspring they can create, and these will be our secondary colours. So first we'll combine the yellow and the blue, and we're going to create our first secondary colour, which is green. Now, the reason that we can't use green as a primary colour as artists is that I can't give you a puddle of green paint and ask you to extract the yellow and the blue from it. If you want to know more than that about scientific primaries, as I said, Google is your friend. We don't need to worry about that for this video. Let's look at our next combination. So now we're going to mix the yellow and the red. And we're going to make our second, which is orange. And the last thing we're going to do is mix our red and our blue. Well, I'm not very good at drawing straight lines, am I? And now we've made some nice purple. So here we have primaries, red, blue, yellow. And here we have secondaries, orange, green, and purple. Let's think about warm and cool colours, particularly when it comes to the primaries. Now, as humans, we consider blue to be a cool colour and yellow and red to be warm colours. However, it's a little bit more complex than that because there is no such thing as a warm or a cool colour. If I were to touch these, they're all the same temperature. Think about it like a scented candle. If I gave you 2 scented candles and you lit them and you had a smell of each of them, and I asked you to describe them, and you described one as warm and energetic and the other one as relaxing and calming, those would just be emotional responses to how those scented candles made you feel. It's the same with colours. As humans, we tend to think of blues and greens as being cold things like water and ice. We tend to think of things like yellows and reds as being warm, like the sun or a desert or fire. And within each of these colours, they can be considered to be towards warm or towards cool. I've got a whole video that explains more about warm and cool colours. But if you've ever picked up a tube of blue paint and wondered why it says red shade or green shade, that's all about colour warmth. So although blue is a cool colour, we could consider that it tends towards the cool green end of the spectrum, or we could consider that it tends towards the pink red end of the spectrum. It's just like the concepts of hard and soft. One mattress might be considered hard compared to a softer mattress, but that soft mattress might itself be considered a hard mattress when compared to an even softer mattress. So that's generally how warm and cool works. Now we have some really interesting things going on here, because as well as 3 primaries and 3 secondaries, we also have all of our colour opposites. And these are the ones that you'll see if you look on a colour wheel. So if we take our primaries, blue and red and yellow, their opposites are the colours that are missing. So if we take blue, for example, and look at our primaries, what is missing? What's missing is the yellow and the red. Mix those together and we have orange. If we take the red, what's missing is blue and yellow. Mix them together, we have green. And the yellow, what's missing is the blue and the red. Mix them together and we have purple. So if you are faced with any of the primaries or the secondaries and you can't remember the colour opposite, you can work out what's missing. So what about if we start with a secondary colour? So say we start with orange. We know that orange is made from red and yellow. What's the primary that's missing? It's blue. So with any of these colours, we can ask ourselves what's missing. If there's more than one colour of the primaries missing, we add it to the other and we get our opposite colour. So you'll never need to forget what your colour opposites are again. Just remember that each set of opposites contains all 3 primary colours. So if you have one colour, work out what of the primaries is missing and you will find your colour opposite. So what does an opposite colour do? Well, if we place them next to each other, so let's place some yellow next to some purple. Now, because they're so different, what they can do when placed next to each other is become more vibrant and bright. So if you want something that really stands out, you can place the opposite colour near it. But what happens if we mix the 2 opposite colours together? A little of an opposite colour will mute a colour. We're going to talk more about this later in the video when we start to look at neutrals. But let's take our yellow and let's add a little of our purple in, and we start to mute our original colour. Well, up to this point, we've just mixed 2 colours together. So we've been kind of thinking of them loosely as parents and children. But now we're going to mix 3 colours together. This actually has a lot more in common with cats than it does with people. I'll explain in a moment. But first, please do take the opportunity to like and share this video, leave me a comment, and don't forget to free subscribe. This channel is fully cat approved. Now, so far we've just mixed 2 colours together, but unlike humans, did you know that female cats can carry a litter that contains the DNA of more than one male? I was astonished when I first discovered this. So basically you could get a tabby grey cat and she could go out and fall in love with 2 other male cats, maybe a black cat and an orange cat. And when she had her babies a few weeks later, there could be a whole mixture in there. So in other words, she can get pregnant by more than one male at a time. Isn't that fascinating? Now, of course, all sorts of things happen with humans, either by scientific interference or just sometimes you get anomalies. I believe I did read a case where a lady was carrying twins by 2 different fathers, but let's not worry too much about all of that. We're just talking generally here. So what we're going to do now is take our family and make a mixture of all 3 of these base colours. So instead of making a baby colour with 2 of these parent colours, we're now going to make 1 colour from all 3 of these colours. So what happens when we mix all 3 of our primaries together? And remember that mixing all 3 of our primaries together is exactly the same as mixing our colour opposites together, because each of these sets of opposites contains all 3 primaries. So let's give it a go. Now, spoiler alert, rather than some very pretty and varied kittens, what we're going to get here is a neutral colour. So we'll add some yellow, a little bit of the red, a little bit of the blue. Now, if we end up with a secondary colour rather than a neutral, it just means that I've got quantities wrong. So let's have a go. There we are. We're getting too much of the yellow. I did quite a lot of it because it's the weaker of the colours, but we need to add more of the pink and perhaps the blue. And I am on extremely cheap practice paper here. We should end up with either a brown or a grey. It's not quite brown, is it? Let's keep working on it. And finally, we have a neutral colour. So what determines whether or not you'll get brown or beige or grey from this mix of 3 primaries? It's all depending on how much blue is in the mix, because blue is our only cool colour. So therefore, if the blue is dominant and there's a little less of the other colours, then we should eventually end up with a grey. So here's our lesson so far. If we mix our 3 primary colours, if we mix 2 of them together, we will end up with a secondary colour. And there are only 3 secondaries and only 3 primaries. These colours have opposites, and the opposites are made up by the primaries that are missing from the initial colour or the initial mix. If we mix all 3 primaries together, or any combination of these colour opposites, we will end up with a grey or a brown. And what determines whether or not we get grey or brown is how much cool blue is in the mix or how much warm red and yellow is in the mix. So people will often give you these sets of secondaries and tell you that you can make, we'll make a grey from blue and orange, or we'll make a brown from red and green, or sometimes they'll talk about making a grey from purple and yellow. Now, sometimes this works, but it's hugely dependent on what sort of colour you're starting with. Because when you have a pre-mixed green, you don't have any control over how much yellow is in it, what type of yellow, or how much blue is in it. And so you're already mixing then from a pre-mixed arrangement, and you may get something that looks a little odd. You can't take every yellow in the world and every purple in the world and mix them together and always expect to get a grey, because something in the mix, like the yellow or the red, may overwhelm everything else. Therefore, if you want to make shadow colours, it's generally better to start your mix with your primaries. Now let's talk about black and white. So I have some white here. You're not really going to see it on this paper, but I'm going to lay it down anyway. Now, in some mediums that are transparent, such as watercolour, white isn't used much because you can just water the colour down and get a lighter colour. Whereas in an opaque medium, such as oils or acrylics, you can place the white opaque paint on top of other colours. In fact, white is pretty much always opaque. So if I mix it here with some dark blue, what I've actually done is I've made a pastel colour. I've also made a colour that's a little more chalky looking, and it will be slightly more opaque than other colours. If I try and lay it over the top, you may see it a little bit even when working with watercolour. Technically, white is not a colour, it is a surface that reflects all light, because all of these colours are simply surface textures that our brain interprets. They're not physical actualities. Different people may see the same colour differently. And if we go between species, things like dogs and cats, they may not see the same colours as us at all. And some animals can actually see things that we can't. Insects, for example, can see ultraviolet light. Now, what about black? So from a scientific point of view, black is a colour, or a surface rather, that doesn't reflect any light, which is why professional artists are sometimes so wary of using it, because it will make everything look a little bit dull. There are certainly times when black paint can be useful, but I wouldn't at all use it to darken other colours. I have a video all about different methods of making your colours look darker in watercolour. I'll link that one in the video description. The basic makeup of black is a lot like grey in that it is a mix of all 3 primaries with bias towards the blue end of the spectrum. So for a quick recap of our family tree method, our parent colours are red, blue and yellow. Any combination of 2 will make our secondary colours of orange, purple and green. White is a surface that reflects all light. Black is a surface that absorbs all light. And if we mix our family of 3 colours, all of them together, we will get either brown if our mix tends towards the red and the yellow, or we will get grey if we have more blue in the mix. All three of our primary colours and all three of our secondary colours make our colour opposites, and each pair of colour opposites contains all three primary colours. So by viewing our colours in this simple family tree method, we don't have to worry about colour wheels, and we now have a full understanding of how to mix each colour. Now, of course, there's a lot more to it than this, but those are the absolute basics, and that's as much as you need to know to start your painting journey. So let me know if this video helped you to understand a little bit more easily how to mix your colours and what results you're going to get. Don't forget to have a look in the video description. I've linked you some other videos there that are going to help you understand more about colour mixing. You'll also find links to all of my online courses, both free and paid, and also some free downloadable PDFs that you can grab for no money whatsoever. And lastly, here's a question. Leave me the answer in the comments. What's your favourite colour? Mine's green.